It certainly sounded like a bit of a dig at the British government. The US president told the Irish Parliament tonight that Westminster should be working more closely with Dublin to resolve the issues in Belfast.
The United Kingdom should be working closer with Ireland in this endeavour. Political violence must never again be allowed to take hold in this island.
He's had to deny that he's anti-British on this trip already, and last night confused the New Zealand All Black rugby team with the notorious black and tans from the days of British imperial rule in Ireland. So it's not entirely going to plan. Also on News at 10. A 21-year-old Air Force National Guardsman is arrested over the leak of top-secret Pentagon documents in the US. On the eve of a critical judgment on Macron's pension reforms, Paris is once again beset by violent protests. Flatlining why strikes are now holding back economic growth, and
everybody can wear just the things they want.
Remembering Mary Quant, the designer who gave us the miniskirt and much, much more.
She liked something that's around like Rolleiflex cameras. When they stopped, it was like you knew something had changed, and she was always there, really, wasn't she?
This is ITV News at 10 with Tom Bradby.
Good evening. Earlier today, we were planning to drop President Biden's Irish adventure down our news agenda. He'd had his moment in the sun, and indeed the rain in Northern Ireland, observed the niceties of protocol with the UK, and headed on to the Republic, which he was clearly looking forward to a great deal more. But this evening, something happened to change our minds. The president, who spoke eloquently yesterday about America was Britain's partner in peace in Northern Ireland, appeared to undermine that approach and that of his British hosts. In today's speech to the Irish Parliament in Dublin, he said the United Kingdom should be working closer with the Irish Republic to support the people of Northern Ireland. In some quarters, that has gone down like the proverbial lead balloon. The word snub was among the politer criticisms of Mr. Biden's remark.
During his fleeting visit to Belfast, he was early for everything. In Dublin, President Biden has been late for everything. He's been taking his time because he's savouring every moment south of the border, including this, his speech to the Irish Parliament, which he clearly found deeply personal.
Well, Mom, you said it would happen.
Soon, and with some architects of the Good Friday Agreement in the gallery, he turned his attention to Northern Ireland.
Peace is precious. It still needs its champions. It still needs to be nurtured.
In Belfast, he kept his opinions to himself, but here he did not, suggesting the UK was not working hard enough with Dublin to help the North.
As the Taoiseach and I have discussed, including last month in Washington, and again today, how Ireland and the United States can work together with the United Kingdom and the European Union to support the people of Northern Ireland. I think that the United Kingdom should be working closer with Ireland in this ever.
Earlier in the day, the Irish Prime Minister was asked if he thought Mr. Biden was anti-British.
I don't agree with that assessment, and that's certainly not my experience of President Biden or his administration. They're very keen to have a strong and special relationship with the United Kingdom.
And I'm not going home. I'm staying here. And this is an incredible place.
Only the Irish president's dog didn't play ball.
That dog.
This for all my Irish ancestors. Fourth one for peace.
The bell put up to mark a decade of peace in Northern Ireland, rung in honour of the 25th anniversary by a president who could not be more enamoured with the land of his forefathers.
I'm afraid all of my delegations are going to want to stay and not go home.
Tonight, President Biden is attending a banquet at Dublin Castle for which he arrived almost 2 hours late. He's enjoying himself. an American president relishing his Irish comfort zone.
And John is in County Mayo tonight, where preparations are underway for the presidential roadshow to arrive tomorrow. John, as you say, he's clearly enjoying himself, possibly more than the British government may have enjoyed his comments tonight. What did you make of them?
Well, Tom, we know Joe Biden is no fan of Brexit, and today he was suggesting that in relation to Northern Ireland, Anglo-Irish relations are suffering. Now, he said the UK, if he'd said the UK should work closely with Dublin, that would have been fine, but he didn't. He said the UK should work more closely with Dublin. That makes it a criticism of Rishi Sunak's government. Tom, Joe Biden spent just 17 hours in Belfast, half of them asleep. It was an extremely muted visit. His remarks at the Ulster University were restrained. He didn't criticize anybody, and I think he and the White House were frustrated by that. The skeptical among us may conclude that a leader of the free world who was unable to speak his mind chose not to hang around. By comparison, he's spending 3 days in the Irish Republic, and he is speaking his mind. He didn't mention the Democratic Unionist Party by name, but reading between the lines, he was saying, look, London, it's time to stop treating the DUP with kid gloves. It's time to work more closely with London to persuade the Democratic Unionists to get back up to Stormont, get the Assembly working again so American money can flow in and the Northern Ireland peace can become more secure.
OK, John, thanks very much indeed. Well, while Mr. Biden was soaking up the sun and indeed the adulation of the Irish in the Republic, back home in Washington, his Department of Defense was defending itself over one of the biggest leaks of intelligence secrets in its modern history. The mystery that has been gripping the United States about the identity of the leaker may well be over. A suspect is under arrest. He is one of their own, a young Air Force National Guardsman.
In the driveway of his family home in Massachusetts, Jack Teixeira was arrested by FBI agents. He is the man believed by officials to have leaked a treasure trove of top-secret documents into a chat room on a gaming platform. As he gingerly walked backwards and into custody, America is left to wonder how the 21-year-old had access to so much. His leaks have left the Pentagon and the CIA severely embarrassed and now in the midst of a major damage assessment exercise.
The department is taking the issue of this unauthorized disclosure very seriously. We continue to work around the clock, along with the interagency and the intelligence community, to better understand the scope, scale, and impact of these leaks.
Teixeira was a member of the intelligence wing of the Massachusetts Air National Guard. According to those who interacted with him online, he was a man who loved weapons and had an anti-government streak to his character. But he was not in the pay, they say, of foreign agents.
Any claims that he is a Russian operative or pro-Russian is categorically false. He was a young, charismatic man who loved nature, God, who loved shooting guns and racing cars.
In a sign of the sensitivity of the case, it was the Attorney General himself who announced the investigative breakthrough.
Today, the Justice Department arrested Jack Douglas Teixeira in connection with an investigation into alleged unauthorized removal, retention, and transmission of classified national defense information. FBI agents took Teixeira into custody earlier this afternoon without incident.
The question now is how much damage has been caused. For example, whether revelations about Ukraine's military vulnerabilities and shortage of ammunition will force a change to the planned spring offensive. And it may give Russia a chance to change its military codes and procedures. Now their generals know how deeply US spy agencies have penetrated their military decision-making. The nature of this case and the profile of the suspected leaker and the bizarre platform Teixeira used to spill the secrets is very different from other recent unauthorized disclosures. It now means the Pentagon and all 18 US intelligence agencies will have to reevaluate who has access to America's secrets. After 9/11, it was decided to share information more widely across the government. Now, the opposite impulse may win the day. Robert Moore, News at 10, Washington.
There has been another evening of angry protests across France before the country's constitutional court rules tomorrow on President Macron's raising of the retirement age from 62 to 64. The court has to decide whether he acted improperly by pushing it through without Parliament's approval. And if, as seems likely, the court rules in the president's favour, that will only fuel the protesters' fury.
For the 12th time in as many weeks, the streets of central Paris echo to the sound of powerful firecrackers and clouds of tear gas billowing down the boulevards outside City Hall. These were skirmishes rather than running battles. A combination of heavy-handed policing and some protesters determined today will not be peaceful. Meant thousands of riot police moving from flashpoint to flashpoint. This is a constant game of cat and mouse between the police here and a hardcore of protesters. The reality is that the numbers protesting today against raising the retirement age from 62 to 64 were down significantly. A little over a month ago, more than 1 million were on the streets of Paris. Today, barely 50,000, which is perhaps why a small minority were so determined the headlines should be about violence. A short distance away, the corporate headquarters of luxury goods firm Louis Vuitton near the Champs-Élysées were stormed, an attack on a company that symbolises everything they despise. A minor outbreak of trouble too in the western city of Rennes, while protests elsewhere, here marching through Toulouse, largely passed off peacefully. Back in Paris, all these months of protest may soon be overshadowed by a decision in the country's constitutional court tomorrow. They'll decide whether President Macron's new law breaches the constitution and whether forcing it through by avoiding a vote in Parliament was acceptable. A defeat would shatter Macron's authority in a way street protests never could, but he's likely to win. Those we spoke to today seem pretty resigned to that. Why are you here today?
Because I'm a teacher and I don't want to work after 62.
Do you think you can win this battle against Macron?
Not sure. 50-50.
Do you think you can win this battle against Macron?
I don't think so, but we'll see tomorrow.
But you'll protest anyway?
Yes.
Defeat in court would be unlikely, though, to end the protests. Indeed, it may simply encourage the belief that in France, change only ever happens on the streets. James Mace, News at 10, Paris.
Cast your mind back to the beginning of January, and cutting the NHS waiting list in England was one of the Prime Minister's 5 priorities. So how is that going? Not very well. In February, the number of people awaiting appointments or treatment rose to its highest level yet, 7.22 million. And that was, of course, before the junior doctors' strikes that are highly likely to push that figure higher still.
On picket lines manned today by junior doctors, the familiar sound of industrial action. But inside, it is the silence that's striking. During 4 days of walkouts, almost every routine operation has been cancelled at King's College Hospital, 600 in total, and 6,000 outpatient appointments. The chief executive says emergency care is being covered, but he is worried.
There are patients who have cancer having delays in their treatment. We're delaying the possible diagnosis of cancer in patients. We know from history that these sort of disputes end with a negotiated settlement. And that needs to happen very, very urgently because of the potential harm we are now causing to our patients.
Historically, has it ever been as bad as this?
I've been in health now for over 40 years and I've never experienced something along these lines in terms of an industrial dispute, no.
This would normally be a hive of activity, operation after operation, taking people off the waiting list. But this empty room is the reality of this strike, here at King's and all over the country. And it's bad news for the backlogs. New figures today show that even before the doctors' strikes, the numbers waiting for routine hospital treatment rose by 10,000 to a record 7.22 million. Meanwhile, 1 in 10 people arriving at A&E waited more than 12 hours to be seen. But there was some good news. The number of people still on waiting lists after 18 months fell by 35% to just under 30,000. The fear is that strike delays will make things worse. In Chelmsford, Essex, cricket mad Harry, who has cerebral palsy, is living in pain, waiting for an operation on his foot. But today, it was cancelled and pushed to June.
I was disappointed, tearful, not happy.
Just frustrated. I've been waiting for so long. It's like nails getting stabbed in my foot.
Back at King's, junior doctors said the strikes were not just about pay but quality of service, and said they believed patients understood that.
I don't want to be on strike. These kind of days of disruption are an investment in the future and the continuation of us being able to provide care.
The hooting and the honking and all of that from the cars coming past, we do feel like the public sentiment is actually with us.
Many are calling for the mediation service, ACAS, to help solve this dispute. The government says it's open to that, but only if junior doctors significantly cut their 35% pay demand.
And Anushka joins us now with a bit of an update tonight on the nurses' ballot on their pay offer.
Yeah, the government made an offer to nurses and all other NHS staff, apart from doctors, of a one-off payment of around £2,500 and 5% next year. And it felt like a breakthrough because most unions recommended that to their members, including two of the biggest ones, Unison and the Royal College of Nursing. Now, those two ballots actually close tomorrow, and sources I'm speaking to tonight do suggest that the RCN, the members, they are expecting them to reject that offer. I should say, it is not over yet. The ballot's open until 9 a.m. I'm told that it is quite close, but it would take a lot tonight to overturn heading towards rejection. If they did that, they've actually still got a strike mandate until later into May. So we could see nurses walking out within the next few weeks. It is possible that some vote for it and some against. If so, it will depend on the numbers. If enough unions back it, the pay offer could go ahead.
OK, Anushka, thank you very much indeed. And strikes by other public service workers, teachers and civil servants, among them, dented hopes of economic growth in February. The economy is still, like many family finances, bumping along the bottom. There was no growth to speak of. GDP barely changed. But as Joel is here to explain, the economy is managing to cling on to the level it was before the pandemic. Joel.
Tom, the UK economy did not grow in February, but neither did it shrink. The headline figure of 0 may feel deeply unimpressive, but the Office for National Statistics now thinks growth over the last year was a bit stronger than it previously thought. And many economists now think we're set to avoid a recession. The initial data for February suggests the construction sector expanded strongly, while activity in the production and services sectors contracted slightly. The performance of the services sector, the largest by far, was heavily impacted by strikes. Output in public administration and in education fell sharply there. Now, industrial action is holding back growth, but the Chancellor, who's in Washington for the International Monetary Fund's spring meeting, said junior doctors are not going to get the 35% pay rise they're looking for.
We understand that people have had pay rises that have not matched inflation. And that's why we've introduced cost of living payments of around £3,000 for the average household up and down the country, nearly £100 billion of support. The one thing we won't do, because it would be a terrible mistake, is to agree to an inflationary pay rise.
Now, what a difference 5 months makes. Last November, the Bank of England said it thought we were heading for this: 2 years of falling output. Most economists believe a recession of some kind was inevitable. It hasn't happened. The one reason for this is that the financial support the Chancellor just referred to appears to have been very effective at protecting households and businesses from the full force of high inflation and rising interest rates. But the big picture is still weak. Over the last last year, the economy's barely grown, expanding, contracting, flatlining from one month to another. Our economy has returned to its pre-COVID size, but the likes of the United States, France, Canada, Italy, Germany and Japan have recovered more quickly. And the International Monetary Fund expects those countries to outperform the UK again this year. Indeed, Tom, the IMF thinks the UK will be one of the worst performing economies in the world in 2023.
OK, but can I just ask you a question on this? Why does the IMF keep saying we're going to bump along at the bottom of the class? Are we? Is that right? And if so, why?
Well, look, the IMF, Tom, thinks the UK faces three unique challenges. The labour force today is smaller than it was, believe it or not, before COVID. It thinks that the number of households with mortgages in the UK mean higher interest rates bite harder here. And the IMF points out that Brexit has damaged trade and business investment. Now, the Chancellor says the IMF has been far too pessimistic in the past and it will be proved wrong yet again.
OK, let's hope so for all our sakes. That was very clear, Joel. Thank you very much indeed. Now, when there is so much anxiety about the damage gambling can do to so many lives, it has not been a good look for the Premier League that 8 out of its 20 teams have the logos of betting company sponsorship on the front of their shirts. Now the teams have collectively agreed to remove them. Of course, it could be out of the goodness of their hearts and not jumping before they were pushed by the government, but new laws are on the way. Either way, the change won't happen for another 3 years.
And free bets every time your team plays.
Whether you're an armchair fan or regular matchgoer, you can't escape football's intimate financial relationship with gambling. But from 2026, the Premier League is introducing a voluntary ban on gambling logos on the front of their matchday shirts. It's a significant development, according to one England superstar and former addict who lost hundreds of thousands of pounds.
There's a long way to go, but, you know, there's a lot of addicts out there. It's a silent disease. It's on the increase and it's getting worse all the time. And certainly, you know, hopefully they'll see that something's being done to try and get gambling advertising out of football.
Currently, 8 of the Premier League's 20 clubs have a front-of-shirt deal with a gambling company. None is a Big Six club. It's thought that earns each of them, on average, £7 million a year. Financial experts estimate replacement sponsors are unlikely to match that figure, which could cost the clubs up to £2 million each. But while the front of shirts will be a no-go zone, there will be no restriction on advertising elsewhere, on players' kit or around the grounds. Campaigners say the self-imposed restrictions do not go far enough.
There are millions of people like me that are either trying to stop gambling or are trying to abstain from gambling, who are constantly being encouraged to gamble by their favourite sport. That's not fair, that's not safe, and that's why, to repeat, a gambling advertising ban must be more comprehensive than just front of shirts.
While Premier League clubs will not be overly impacted by this agreement, if something similar was enforced in the leagues below, the outcome would be very different, as the finances of most lower league clubs are far more precarious. Steve Scott, News at 10.
The scandal of racist, sexist and other unacceptable attitudes in London's Metropolitan Police has been highlighted yet again in a series of shared WhatsApp messages, including mocking comments about Harvey, the disabled son of the model and celebrity Katie Price. 8 past and present officers with the force have been found guilty of gross misconduct over the messages they shared. 7 were men, 1 was a woman. Katie Price welcomed the decision and said she hoped those officers still serving would be dismissed. Now, from the same group of Oxford University scientists who brought us the AstraZeneca coronavirus vaccination, there's now one for malaria that could save thousands more lives around the world. Ghana in West Africa has become the first country to approve it. Well over 500,000 people, most of them children, most of them in Africa, die from malaria every year.
It attacks some of the world's youngest and most vulnerable children, killing hundreds of thousands every year. But now malaria may finally have met its match. The first vaccine to be approved by a nation was developed at Oxford University by the same team behind their COVID jab.
Lots of things are novel about this vaccine, first anti-parasitic vaccine, but also the way it's been licensed. This is a first, where we have an African country saying, we're not too bothered about what the rest of the world thinks. We believe this is the right vaccine for our population now, and we're going to license it today and start distributing it this year.
Malaria kills more than 600,000 people each year, 80% of them children under 5 and 96% in Africa. A trial gave 3 doses to each child with a booster a year later and resulted in giving 75% protection. Crucially, scientists say their vaccine is cheap and plans are in place to manufacture more than 100 million doses a year. The World Health Organization is considering if it will recommend the vaccine, but countries don't have to wait for their approval.
We'll monitor the quality of the vaccine while it is being used. We'll ensure that it is used properly. We'll ensure that if they bring it in, they get a permit, they use it. If there's any problem, we will be sure that we are there. We'll be sure that we are monitoring the safety with our pharmacovigilance systems, etc. But we don't go into discussions of cost. We don't go into discussions of rollout.
The search for an effective malaria vaccine has been one of the toughest challenges in infectious diseases for more than a century. But scientists have concerns about how much international funding will be available to ensure it reaches those who need it most. Amy Lewis, News at 10.
Unlocking the secrets of the universe is not for the impatient. A European mission to look for microscopic signs of life on the moons of Jupiter was due to set off from Earth today and take 8 years to get there. After today, that'll be a little bit longer. The European Space Agency's mission had to be postponed because of the risk of lightning at its launch site in French Guiana. The spacecraft, known as JUICE, short for Jupiter Icy Moons Explorer, will try again tomorrow. Now, finally, before Mary Quant started designing clothes, young women dressed like their mothers in frumpy fashions from dowdy department stores, just as they had since the Second World War. Well, sadly, Dame Mary, the revolutionary who helped change all that, has died at the grand old age of 93. She put the mini into miniskirt, it must be said, the hot into hot pants, and made a makeup range all of her own. And she put British fashion on the global style map.
When Mary Quant invades new realms of fashion, bright young girls are interested.
She didn't exactly invent the miniskirt, but she made it mean something. This was the swinging 60s, and Mary Quant was synonymous with this cultural revolution. She signalled that women could throw off the often drab looks of the post-war 50s and feel free to wear colours and short hems.
Everybody can wear just the things they want, the hemlines they want, trousers under dresses, no rules, you know.
Young women lapped up this no-rules philosophy. This, after all, was the era of the Beatles and the explosion in popular music. In terms of impact, Mary Quant was hailed their 60s fashion equivalent. This was Mary Quant's first shop on London's King's Road, which she opened with her husband and a friend. London was regarded as the epicentre of this new movement, and the man whose lens documented the times was David Bailey.
Well, she's like, I don't know, she's like something that's around like Rolleiflex cameras. When they stopped, it was like you knew something had changed, and she was always there, really, wasn't she?
You actually got to work with her so many times, so you knew her.
I did. I worked with her a lot. Through my life, she is one that was consistent all my life.
She put the quant in quantity, and she put quality into ready-to-wear fashion.
By the early 60s, the designer had expanded into the UK mass market with a new, more affordable range. Her business boomed as she branched into the US. She expanded into makeup, becoming a brand. Mary Quant was of her time and ahead of it, experimenting with new materials. She was the first designer to use PVC. She designed coloured tights. Today, Twiggy, the model who is perhaps most closely associated with the era and the miniskirt, paid tribute, writing, "The 1960s would have never been the same without her."
Finally, Mary Quant receiving her Fashion Award for Great Britain.
Mary Quant helped define an era. For millions of women, she represented not just fashion, but freedom.
Dame Mary Quant, First Lady of Fashion, who died this morning. And for those about to go to bed, she also said she popularised the duvet. Now you know it all. Good night. Thanks for watching.